fellow travelers. Welcome to another exciting level of the RPG Cave. This is level 121. Yes, that's a palindrome, folks. I am one of your hosts, the level 199 Dark Lord, Ryan Turford, and I am joined, as always, by the doctor himself, the level 199 Battle Alchemist, Dr. Garret Bland. How's it going, Garret?
I'm doing good, man. I can't believe I got this to work. I just showed you this, so I had to brag a little bit. Yeah, I'm not gonna turn the camera. It's gonna be all throw up here or whatever. I'm just gonna take a picture of what's happening right now in front of my screen, y'all. I am recording on a Steam Deck.
You sure are, buddy.
I got Windows installed. I put Audacity in there. I have it, mirrored into my monitor right in front of me. And just I filled up all the USB ports, and the headphone jack. Like all the holes are filled up, and we're ready to go. We're recording right now.
Word phrasing, Garret. Phrasing.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Good God. Yes, tonight is our very first episode from a Steam Deck. We are live to the internet from the Steam Deck.
I did the craziest thing possible. Yes.
Just showing off the power, Garret. The power of the Steam Deck. Yeah.
I'm going to put it on the RPG Cave Discord channel just to make sure everyone knows.
Well, I may as well clear the dungeon while you're doing that, Garret.
Sure, go for it.
Folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of amazing ways you can do that. Number one, if you're watching the live stream right now over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to hit that like button, slightly tap that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments below. Are you excited about Avowed? Do you like Obsidian's games? Do you want to just tell us other RPG facts? Let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to, of course, rate us if you're listening to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Maybe you leave a nice, Apple Podcast review, or the main thing you can do to help us out on audio feeds is clicking that subscribe button. Of course, that helps the show get discovered. Also, if you want one big podcast feed with the entire Carpool Gaming cinematic universe on it, or some exclusive content, you can head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar. And of course, we got all kinds of cool exclusive content over there, like the Pants Patreon podcast for patrons podcast. A little bit of a heartfelt one this week, actually, from Matt, because it was actually his final Pants episode this week before he departs from Carpool next week. So we also got that. We got BTS coming soon. We got, it could be anything, all kinds of cool stuff on the Patreon. So head on over there. Cool. Also, we teased this a little bit, but please be excited. February 5th, the future of Carpool Gaming. That's all I'm going to say. So look out for that. We'll tell you all about that on February 5th. So
new age.
I'm keeping the excitement afloat, Garret. It's happening. And of course, we got our website, carpoolgaming.com, where you can head on over there. You can buy an RPG Cave t-shirt if you want to support the show that way, or if you want to wear any of our other merch, we got it all over there. Or as well, we've got all our podcasts on carpoolgaming.com as well. Well, Garret, without further ado, we're not going to read from the sacred text just yet.
Okay.
See the fake out I did a little bit because this isn't on the document at all. But I have to ask you. You posted a picture this week, Garret.
I did.
Of you playing this little video game.
Yes.
On the Sega CD for the first time. And I have to ask you about it because I need your because I know it's going to probably be a while before we do the episode on Lunar the Silver Star for the Sega CD, which of course I'm having Garret play now. So since it might be a little while before we do that, I want to check in with you to get some very quick impressions of the what you think about this game. The very beginning. First of all, did you watch the intro? Did you watch the intro?
I did watch the introduction. Yes, it is very.
It's 90s as hell, isn't it?
It is so 90s. Like, not even kidding. Like, I felt like I was in the original Power Rangers or something like that. Just hearing the music. What really surprised me is actually the voice acting. I'm like, whoa, they have actual voice acting sound bits in here, and it's super weird. To hear that in the beginning. Other than that, man, the game is okay. I am for sure definitely like having a guide with me.
Yeah, that's why I made sure to recommend it. There's a reason why I did that.
Yeah, when I was reading the guide, I'm like, how are you supposed to know that? Like at all? Like it's one of those type of games.
1992 Ryan just figured it out somehow. Just
I don't know
by
how you
playing and
figured
figuring
it
it
out.
out. Yeah, I didn't have a strategy guide or anything, and it wasn't there was nothing in magazines about this game, so it's just my older brother Kyle and I would basically play at the same time because it was his game,
Mhm.
and we would just figure it out together.
Even the first part, because there's just so much backtracking.
Yeah,
Like, it's like, "Okay, now you have to go back," and I'm like, "Wait, what is going on here? Like, how do you
yeah.
progress like this?" But, yeah, it's going okay. I'm at the part where need to repair the bridge,
Okay.
near the village, so way in the beginning. Um, the battle system is pretty good, pretty rock solid.
Yeah,
You kinda do this kinda, the turn-based, but also it's positional based,
yeah.
where you
Which is kinda
kinda
cool. I like that.
yeah, it really is. Sometimes you have the ability to double attack, or if it's too far away, maybe it's only like a single attack or no attack at all. It just really depends on how far you are away from the enemies. I like that little mechanic flair involved. But other than that, of course, you got your attack, your magic. It's pretty similar to other turn-based role-playing games in that regard. But yeah, random encounters, pretty big.
Yep. So
I'm
sometimes
not
you'll just
surprised.
walk like 3 feet and you'll just get random encounter, and then you'll walk 3 feet again and more random encounters, and
Yeah, it's
that's
like being in in the cave of Pokemon games, but,
yeah.
other than that, man, it's not bad so far. I just
Nice.
gotta, keep along with it, keep along
Yeah.
the story and then, make sure to have that guide right next to me because
No, for sure. Like,
I
that's
ain't
the
gonna
main
figure it
reason
out.
why I told you, because like, a lot of that game for figuring out what to do next is paying attention to the dialogue, and if you
Yeah,
put the game down for a bit and then don't come and then forget what dialogue they told you to you forget to know where to go, like,
yeah.
that guide is very handy for that kinda game because it's just very old school in that way. So,
Yeah,
but more
even at that, I didn't even like I didn't read the guy initially, and I was just kinda like, messing around, and,
mhm,
I got outside the village, and I was just, like, having no idea what to do. I didn't have a weapon, I didn't
yep,
have a shield, I didn't
yep,
have anything, like, on me. I was like, "What am I supposed to do?" So, yeah, no, definitely use a guide for Lunar if you ever
yep.
get to it now for the
Well,
first time.
especially like with some of the spells too, because wait till you get and start earning some magic, Garrett, and then you get spells like little litany or
Oh,
bye
okay.
bye air, and you're like, what do these even do? And
Mm,
yeah, I mean,
interesting.
you gotta like you can of course experiment yourself,
Right,
but
there's
also
no,
it's just,
like, description at all on
no,
these
there's
spells.
no
Okay.
description for anything or
Yeah.
what anything does. Yeah, like you kind of like even when you're equipping items, you have to like go into the stats menu to see what
Oh my
stats
gosh.
increase in order to kind of figure out like what's better or what's worse with this game. Because then
This
again,
is an OG RPG, let me tell
well,
you.
because again, like you talked about the fact that this game has voice acting, Garrett. The thing that blew me away with this game, playing it in 1992,
Mhm.
was the fact that it had voice acting, it had these
Yeah,
cinematics. Like this blew my mind because there weren't any games like this back then.
right, right.
Like there the closest we had was Ninja Gaiden on the NES, which had cutscenes. But and there were a couple Super Nintendo games that did at the time, but none with voice acting, let alone
Yeah,
CD like audio and with the music and stuff like that too. So it's just like that's more along the lines of like the presentation stuff, especially like playing that in 1992 really blew us away, which is also part of the reason why the mechanics feel so out of date was because this game was developed in 1992. So
yes.
when you can like a lot of the more advanced role-playing games of the classic era just hadn't come out like yet. That was before, Final Fantasy 6 came out or Final
Right.
Fantasy 5 even or a lot of the other
It's
big
pretty old
role-playing games in that
RPG,
era.
man.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm enjoying it for what what it is,
yeah,
with the guide, so, yeah, I'll keep
nice.
on at it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the future. We'll do like a bigger
Yeah.
deep dive when we get into it. But I wanted to have some fun and check in a little bit on you with that. But now it is time, Garrett, to read from the sacred texts.
Oh.
That's new. You
I've
caught me
done
by
that
surprise with
before.
that one.
I have certainly done that before, maybe not recently, but I have done the whole, like,
It's been long
holy
enough for me to
holy
forget about
chant.
it.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
just
Oh my god.
I'm keeping you on your toes.
Just derailing the show as always, Garrett. But no, so we're gonna talk about Obsidian tonight because we had
Yes, we
this little
are.
Xbox, developer direct that happened this week, Garrett, and we got to see more of Avowed. And you and I both after the showcase were like, hey, we kind of want to talk about Avowed a little bit after the showcase because it was a game that we were pretty excited about before the showcase, but then we got to see more of it, got to hear like a good 8 minutes about this game. So then like what better way to talk about Avowed, but also to revisit Obsidian as a company. Now, yeah, for longtime listeners of the show, we've done an episode on Obsidian before. You know, I think it was episode 44, which was like 2 years ago.
Long time ago.
It was basically 2 years ago at this point, Garrett. 2022 is when we did an episode on the last episode on Obsidian. So like we wanted to kind of revisit this a little bit. In fact, you might see this happen more often than not this year of us maybe revisiting some old topics that we've done on the show before. Cause like things change. And in Obsidian's case, they've released 2 whole games since the last time we did the Obsidian episode. So I thought it'd be fun for us to kind of revisit the history of Obsidian, kind of talking about, you know, where they've gone from there. I even prepared fun facts. Some of the fun facts are the same from last time, but then I've also spiced it up with new fun facts, Garrett. So we're going to kind of talk about the history tonight, kind of, and kind of how we feel about Obsidian as a developer and how things maybe have changed for them since they've kind of, you know, become under Microsoft. Because I feel like that's the biggest difference between doing this episode now and the last episode on Obsidian. Because
weren't they just acquired, or like it was just a few months?
No, so when we did the last episode, it was 2022. So it was, but they were acquired back in 2018. But other than Outer Worlds, they hadn't really. But other than Outer Worlds, they hadn't released anything under Microsoft. We also hadn't really seen like Microsoft's, you know, push behind them or anything like that. Because especially because Outer Worlds was a 2K game. It wasn't even a Microsoft publisher.
Sorry, I was thinking Obsidian with Bethesda, but that's totally not the case. You're right. Obsidian came way before in the Microsoft umbrella.
Right. But I mean, we hadn't really seen like the fruits of Microsoft labor, whereas now we're starting to see that with Avowed and then some of the other things that we'll talk about that they've released since then as well. So that's why I think this will be an interesting and fun conversation, even if we've heard this topic before. But anyways, Garrett, it is now time for me to regale you and the audience with some fun facts as we do. So just sit back and relax, Garrett. These are quite long, actually. So although maybe we'll take a little break between some of these and talk about some of them. So first off, Obsidian Entertainment was founded on June 12th, 2003, which is a long time ago. In fact, the studio celebrated their 20th anniversary last year, Garrett, which is something we couldn't say before.
Good for them.
Yeah, but we could say now. Of course, the founders of the studio used to work at Black Isle Studios, which were the makers of a bunch of D&D role-playing games over at Interplay Entertainment, which is a company that has an interesting history on its own. Maybe we talk about Interplay one day because they're a very interesting company. And that's all I'm going to say about Interplay. But they made a lot of stuff back in the 90s and early 2000s, including a bunch of, you know, D&D games. In fact, that's how, you know, BioWare got their start as well, because Interplay were the publishers on all the Baldur's Gate games. They published all the Icewind Dale games and everything else. And of course, Obsidian worked on Icewind Dale, which was kind of like their very first series that they were working on. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. They helped BioWare with the Baldur's Gate titles as well. And in fact, they you know, kind of Black Isle kind of published those games, which is interesting. Because
so even though a lot of connections between BioWare, Black Isle, and Interplay,
because like Interplay owned Black Isle. Because Black Isle was basically a studio for Interplay. But what Interplay would do with, you know, certain titles is they would have like their studios do the publishing of other studios' games, which is bizarre, but that's just the way they did things. Because like I said, Interplay was an interesting company to get to know. So maybe again, like I said, I think we'll talk about Interplay one day because I think that'll be interesting. But anyways, they also worked on, I forgot to mention this, Garrett, the first 2 Fallout games as well. So because they were kind of the original developer, because they kind of had 2 teams at Obsidian, one that kind of worked on the D&D stuff, and then the Fallout team was at Black Isle as well. Which is
and then who's the developer for Wasteland 3 now?
NXL.
NXL is part of that same route, right?
Because the Obsidian, one of the Obsidian co-founders, left Obsidian to found In Exile.
Oh, okay. They
And
are
he
all
was
coming from the same CRPG tree going on
yeah.
here.
And he was, of course, was the creator of Fallout. That's how that all came about.
I see. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is just, again, crazy to think about. But at the time of their founding, Garrett, Obsidian had 7 employees, 5 of which were the founders of the company. So
that's funny.
They just had like 2 random people that they also got from Interplay that didn't found the company. But it's interesting to think about the fact that, because you don't really see it that often, because we've talked about a bunch of companies on the show, Garrett. Like, it's not very often that you have 5 people that found the company, like that are all kind of like the co-CEOs with each other, and then they're like 5 of the 7 employees when they start up, which is like really interesting to me. But in the early days, of course, Obsidian was really looking for partners to work with, and they reached out to a bunch of different companies to try and get the ball rolling, including EA and Ubisoft. And in fact, they actually pitched to Ubisoft the idea of doing a Might and Magic video game, because Might and Magic is this old like 1980s like RPG property that, you know, had basically been sitting on the shelf for a while. But instead, Arcane actually kind of beat them to the punch, because they actually developed Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, which was an original Xbox game that also came on the PC. That originally could have been an Obsidian game at one point. In fact, Dark Messiah and Might and Magic didn't review well, but I remember, as someone who used to watch XPlay a lot on G4, like, this was a game like they were hyping up for months and months and months before it came out, and it didn't do so well, unfortunately. But
darn it.
They even pitched, Garrett, which was an interesting fact that I didn't talk about last time. They pitched a game to Take-Two around this time as well, called Future Blight, which was going to be like a Fallout style game, but in the Neverwinter Nights engine, and it was going to be like this medieval kind of Fallout style game. So it's going to be like the original 2 Fallout games. But that ended up like they like Take-Two was interested, but that idea just kind of fell through so that never came out. So it ended up being canceled. But around this time, the call came in late 2003 from LucasArts, who actually inquired about them developing a Star Wars role-playing game. So they wanted to hear their ideas. They didn't actually pitch KOTOR 2, which is kind of where this is leading to. So Obsidian actually pitched the idea of doing like a first-person lightsaber-based role-playing game similar to the Elder Scrolls. But
wouldn't that be just great?
Yeah, like, how cool would that be? Like,
that would have been actually cool.
Yeah,
I would try it out.
Like, reading over some of the interviews, Garrett, was like really interesting from the founder's perspective, because they talked about the idea where they were like, they looked at, you know, games like Morrowind or other first person role playing games. They're like, well, why don't we just do this with Star Wars? That's where that whole idea came from, which is just funny when we compare that to how, you know, they're handling the development of Avowed in a lot of ways. So yeah, this would have been super cool, especially knowing what the studio would turn into and what their pedigree was, which is first person role-playing games. So it actually kind of makes me sad that we never got to see that. But instead, LucasArts, of course, insisted that they actually take on the sequel development to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So they released Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic to the Sith Lords on December 6th, 2004, which was their very first game under the Obsidian brand. What was also interesting about this, Garrett, is notice that I mentioned the call came for them to start development in late 2003. The game came out in December of 2004. I don't know if you know anything about game development, Garrett, but that's like barely any time, especially because around this time, they still only had like 8 employees. So it's just like, I don't know how that game even materialized at this point.
Can you imagine like being like one of the workers, not one of the founders, but just like one of the other workers, and just like, hey, we got to develop a Star Wars game in a year. And it's just like, okay, I'll try it out and see how it goes. And just, man, lightning speed development. And I'm sure back then, earlier years, maybe it's a little easier than it is now, but at the same time, that's very fast. Very fast.
The only reason this worked, Garrett, was because of the fact that KOTOR had just came out the year before, and BioWare was kind enough to lend them most of the assets for the game, including the game's engine and stuff like that. So they basically took the parts of KOTOR 1 and they put like new characters and new story in it.
Yeah.
And kind of just called it a day. Although that also leads to one of the biggest problems with KOTOR 2, which is the ending, because it's totally rushed, because they were supposed to had this whole extra section to the end of the game that actually wrapped up the story, but they had to release the game for December of 2004, so they didn't have time to actually finish the game, which makes me kind of sad. And in fact, Garrett, I don't know if you knew this, with the Switch version of KOTOR 2, there was like the fan added version of like the DLC that they were offering for KOTOR 2 that finished the ending, because
that's interesting.
Because Obsidian had actually programmed most of the ending into the code for the game. It just wasn't implemented in the final base game itself. So people basically took that code and then re-added it to the game to make it final.
Oh my goodness. That's kind of crazy to hear. The links of fans, kind of digging into the past and into the code and re-implement it. People do crazy stuff, and developers. So
yeah,
so cool.
This was actually a big controversy as well with the Switch version of KOTOR 2, because originally it was supposed to come with that DLC, and it was going to be the only way of playing that game on consoles with that DLC. But then, like, after the game came out, like, they're like, oh, by the way, just so you know, we stopped development of that DLC, so we're just not going to add it. And that was like a big
so if I remember correctly, there was something off with the Switch version of KOTOR and KOTOR 2. Was there something wrong with it? I remember rumblings about it.
I mean, they were made by Aspyr, so they didn't have
the highest quality. True. It wasn't Obsidian, of course. It was Aspyr porting everything over. So
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's kind of the biggest problem right there. But anyways, that's enough about KOTOR 2. Let's move on a little bit, because in the years that followed, of course, Obsidian took on the sequel to one of their original D&D games in the form of Neverwinter Nights 2. They created their own new IP in Alpha Protocol, which we'll get to later in the show, because someone actually has a question about Alpha Protocol.
Of course they do.
Which gets me excited, because I love that game. And they also worked on larger franchises like Fallout, Dungeon Siege, and South Park. And that was kind of their bread and butter, was, making sequels to games that already existed or working on licensed games. That was kind of their deal in the mid-aughts, as it were, or the early 2010s. But after the release of South Park, The Stick of Truth, and the company was facing some serious financial woes, because they just didn't really own any of their stuff. So they got like a big...
That's true.
They basically got paid generally for, at the start of the project, but when the game was making money, a lot of times they as a company weren't really making money. So because of that, they didn't really have their own IP at all at this point. So they decided to actually take to Kickstarter to actually kickstart their very first new IP in the form of Pillars of Eternity, because Pillar of Eternity, they put up the Kickstarter for that in 2012, and they wanted to make this a CRPG style game, like Neverwinter Nights or like Icewind Dale. And people were all about that, because at the time, if you remember, Garrett, even though we're getting a lot of CRPGs coming back now, in 2012, like, CRPGs were not really around. Like, that was kind of like a dead genre in a way.
It really was. Like 2012. I don't remember like a notable CRPG other than what was it, Pillars of Eternity. Yeah. I remember that I remember that coming up like later in my head. Like, oh, I remember that name from somewhere.
Yeah, because it actually eventually came out in 2015, but the Kickstarter was in 2012. The Kickstarter was very successful. One of the most successful Kickstarters in history at that point. Of course, we've gotten, more successful Kickstarters since then, but it was definitely around that time, Garrett, where a lot of game companies were funding their games on Kickstarter. Like, that's how we got Mighty Number 9 and Bloodstained Ritual of the Night and things like that.
Mighty Number 9. That was a game.
Those were all on Kickstarter around the same time, which is just interesting to think about. But yeah, so the Kickstarter campaign was very successful, and Pillars of Eternity was actually a huge commercial and critical hit. It was a big deal, and it really kind of helped solidify the footing for Obsidian for financially, to the point where they are able to release some add-ons for the game with some expansions. They also were able to release a sequel in 2018 before the Microsoft acquisition. However, they were really looking for like long-term financial stability at this point, because the company was still, they were in better shape than they were before, but they knew long-term that, they would need to do something pretty drastic to keep the company afloat. But that's when Microsoft actually stepped in and offered to buy the company back in 2018. So on November 10th, 2018, the company Obsidian was acquired by Microsoft. Of course, it was announced when, of course, Microsoft would have these E3 press conferences, Garrett, where they'd come in and be like, we just bought these 5 companies. And this is the thing.
I remember that part, and I was so shocked to see like how many studios like Xbox just like gobbled up just like that. And that was even before the Bethesda acquisition. It was just like, the first time Xbox is like, okay, you're stepping up, you're getting games. And I think it had a fighting chance. And when I saw Obsidian in that, kind of suite of studios over there, I was like, oh, I'm going to be more of an Xbox player, I think, going forward. So,
yeah, I mean, especially because like Obsidian was always known for like really quality games. Like some of their games were, some of the complaints about their games were they were buggy or unfinished at times, with KOTOR 2, of course, and Fallout New Vegas, when Fallout New Vegas did come out, because that even as good as Fallout New Vegas is, Garrett, that was a problem with it whenever it first released, was it was buggy as hell. Like there was there was one glitch where I remember where if you killed a specific character that was wearing a cowboy hat, and you looted the cowboy hat and you wore the cowboy hat, if you ever took the cowboy hat off, the game would just instantly crash and delete your save.
Yeah, I remember you telling me this.
Yeah,
which is so crazy.
It's so ridiculous. So yeah, this was just one of those things with that was just part of like the early days of Obsidian, because the New Vegas kind of had a similar problem that KOTOR 2 had, because they kind of had needed to, when they kind of partnered to really like develop that game, they kind of needed it out the door by a specific deadline, and they just weren't able to get all the bugs done in time. At least they were able to finish the game with that one. But
that's true. Quick factoid: Matthew Perry in Fallout New Vegas.
Yep.
Love the casino voice actors.
Exactly. So also you mentioned a good point, Garrett. You made a good point about the acquisition happening before the Bethesda deal, because at the same time as they announced that they were buying the company, that was also when we got the Outer Worlds announced, which of course was basically like supposed to be Fallout in space, which of course was a big critical and commercial success. But more importantly, that was supposed to serve, like Obsidian was kind of supposed to serve the first person role-playing game sector of Microsoft going forward. And it's interesting that they bought Bethesda in the first place, because I feel like maybe that was kind of what Obsidian's role kind of was. But what was interesting about that I guess none of us really considered at the time, was that this really freed up Obsidian to kind of like do all kinds of crazy ideas and decide that they could kind of just do what they want to, because they had the freedom from Microsoft and the blessing, because they always put out great games, to just do it, throw ideas at the wall and try a bunch of different stuff. So that's how we got 2020's Grounded, which of course was the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style early access game where you're fighting bugs, you're building stuff. It's more of a survival game than a role-playing game. But then you also got Pentiment in 2022, which was honestly my game of the year that year. I loved Pentiment.
That's still crazy to hear from you. That's what makes me want to try out that game. It looks interesting. It looks unique, but it doesn't look like an average everyday gamer would gravitate towards, for sure.
No. Is exactly, especially with like the weird fonts and stuff like that, or the very slow-paced story. I do know that there are certain people who I've talked to who were playing the game at the time it came out, and it literally put them to sleep. Literally.
Yeah.
So
well, it has that, the art style is, it's mosaic. It's a 2D, like kind of mosaic medieval art style. And if you're just not like getting into it and like from that type of approach, like you're just gonna, probably be bored and fall asleep.
No, for sure. Like it took some time for me for that game to get its hooks in me, Garrett. But once it did, like I couldn't think about anything else. I'm just like, I need to see what happens next. I just need to keep playing this game.
And that was not an RPG. That was more of a 2D text-based adventure.
Exactly.
Which is, okay.
It's basically a murder mystery game, and you've got like a bunch of choices, and the choices really affect the game in a big way, because I mean, that's kind of Obsidian's thing. It's always choice-based games like that.
Yes.
Going back to KOTOR 2, their very first game, all about choices. And that's kind of carried through most of their games, except for maybe, Grounded, because you don't really have choices in that game. But
Right.
for the most part, most of their titles have been very choice-based. Yeah, I love Pentiment. I think that game's awesome. But their next game, of course, Avowed, is set to launch in the fall of this year. And we are both very excited.
Please be excited.
Please be excited. And that wraps up, of course, my fun facts. 20 minutes of fun facts, Garrett. We made it through it.
We made it through. Thank you very much for that, revised or refined history, coming back to it and all the games. Now we have a couple of other games in the belt for Obsidian with Grounded and Pentiment. I want to go back to the Outer Worlds a little bit, because in hindsight, you said it should have been like the Fallout in space, and I think that's what I was thinking too at the time.
Yeah.
And I played it in 2019, finished all the way through, and I remember going back to it. It's like that game is so different than a Fallout game. It's very different. Like, you don't really have the crafting systems or anything like there's some guns in there per se, but like, it's not open. It's very, it's different mini worlds. I mean, you got companions, you got choices, you got quests, but it's not as, as wide and expansive as you say, like a traditional Bethesda game. So it's interesting to see the Outer Worlds, and it gives me a better understanding what Avowed's going to be as well. Because that's what they're going to focus. I think it's more focused, more scaled down, but they'll bring out the quality in what they're good at. So yeah,
which is actually an interesting comparison, Garrett. Because now that I think about Starfield, like Starfield in a lot of ways is actually leaning more towards that style versus your traditional Elder Scrolls game in a lot of ways, where you have like,
it really is. Yeah.
You have like giant cities and them, but they're not connected to a lot of the other places. Like, you can't just leave the city and then go explore the rest of the planet just by walking around on it, as an example. Like, it's very different from traditional Elder Scrolls games or Fallout games and stuff like that too. So like, I feel like part of that just works into the idea of the fact that it is in outer space and you are visiting planets. But I kind of like that approach too, because like, I'm more of a fan of like interconnected open zones versus having one big open world. Like, that's one of the reasons why I actually really like Final Fantasy 14, but also games like Rise of the Tomb Raider. I also really like the setup in those games a lot more than just big open spaces. So I mean, I actually prefer that idea. And if the Avowed is anything like that, Karen, like, I'm actually more excited for something like that versus like the big open world, because I feel like they're just better, like they're just more handcrafted in a lot of ways. Like, it doesn't like they're not really thinking about like, okay, well, I need to make sure that everything about this zone needs to fit into the mold of it physically being placed in this world in this location.
Yeah. And I think I want to, kind of go into the open zone definition for like the Starfield. I mean, it's not open world, but it's definitely like, it's non-linear. Like, you kind of just need to go to the place where you need to go in order to do the quest and finish the quest. And then there's some sort of like progression, like, in this area it's like level 30, so maybe you're not supposed to go there. But other than that, it's like, you pretty much can go anywhere. Whereas with the Outer Worlds, there is a logical timeline with like each zone. Like, there is maybe some bleeding here and there, but it's not much as I would say a Bethesda game. So
that's true.
just expect that in Avowed. Like, you're gonna go from one area to the next, and you're just gonna go along with the story, and then there's gonna be some side quests to the side. So yeah,
I'm not expecting it to be super long, which in a way is also nice too, because I like the idea of it being like not a super long role-playing game. Like, I like the fact that, because Outer Worlds, one of the things I liked about it was like, you could finish it in 20 hours very easily. And I mean, that's all I really needed from that game, because not every game I feel like is needs to be a big long, like, you're going to devote 100 to 200 hours into that. But I'm also just one of those people too, where I come from, the position of being like, well, I have a game to do that, and it's Final Fantasy 14 or other MMOs. But I know like not everyone out there is like me, where
Mhm.
maybe they want like that kind of game. Like they want their big open world games to be like that. But
Did you ever play the DLC for Outer Worlds? I'm curious if you ever did.
no, I never did. I have the
Mm.
DLC, but I never played it.
I do have it on Steam, so I may go back and see how that goes, 'cause I heard the DLC is pretty good, like, really,
Mhm.
really good, opens up more.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm excited for Avowed, just like you. This is gonna be
yeah.
good.
It's also going to be interesting too with speaking of Outer Worlds before we move on to Avowed, like
Mhm.
what's going to happen with Outer Worlds 2 because we know Outer Worlds 2
Yeah,
is
that's true.
coming sometime in the future. We don't know when because they've announced it. So I'm curious to know what that game's even going to look like. Like if are they going to stick with the blueprint of the first game or Avowed, or are they
Mhm.
going to try something new with it? I'm curious to see how that one pans out down the road.
Mhm. No, I agree with you. I think, they announced it a while ago. I could imagine it just being a follow-up sequel to the original game and following the same structures, just maybe some extra features here and there. I imagine they won't go too far from the original point. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also important to point out as well, like, you know, now that we've had a little bit more time with since the last time we recorded this, where we've seen now them more under the Microsoft umbrella and seeing them release more games from Microsoft. Like, I don't know about you, Garrett, but I feel like of all the games that they acquired pre Bethesda, like
Mhm.
or companies they've acquired pre Bethesda, like they're probably the strongest developer that they brought under their wing
Mhm.
as far as like their most prolific. Like they remind me of Insomniac in a lot of ways. Where even though they don't really have the game output of Insomniac, because Insomniac's ridiculous. I can't believe they put out like a new game almost every single year.
Mhm.
But Obsidian is the closest thing to it besides maybe the Forza team over at Microsoft. Like I feel like
Mhm.
this team has really been able to, stretch their legs, do their own thing, and kind of put out games at like a pretty good pace. And all their games are pretty solid. Like I feel like they honestly are one of Microsoft's strongest studios, and it's so
Mhm.
cool to actually see them be able to, be safe and try, take risks on stuff like that. Like I think it's super cool looking back on their history and how like they had to scrape by, getting all these licensed properties or
Mhm.
doing sequels to games that weren't theirs, to now being in a position where they can kind of just do what they want because they've put in their dues at this point.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. Definitely that Obsidian was a great get for Xbox and Microsoft, and having those games under that umbrella. I think with games like Grounded and Pentiment, I'm sure we're gonna have more games like this where it's just gonna be experimenting out of like more of a smaller focus Game Pass type of game. And what I mean by that is like kind of a shorter scale game that you wouldn't typically see out in retail. Like it's not gonna it could be like an indie game,
Mhm.
like is selling it for 10 or 20 bucks a la carte. But it's great to see that they have that flexibility of like, hey, we could carve out like a chunk of our team to just try and test this idea out. And it really benefited them with, especially Grounded. I think that's a rock solid survival building crafting game. I know it's pretty successful in Steam as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see, other than of course Avowed and Outer Worlds 2, what other games do they are thinking and under their belts. And I'll be there with Game Pass day
Yeah.
one for sure. Yeah.
Same. Like anytime Obsidian announces that they have a new game, I'm always excited about it. So
Mhm.
at this point, which is pretty cool. But anyways, it's now time to talk about Avowed, Garrett, because I know you sent me a message after the
Yes.
event. You were like, I have things to say about Avowed, so I'm gonna give you the
Yes, I
floor,
do.
Garrett. Like, because we'll of course we got like the 8-minute presentation for Avowed. So what did you think about it, man? Like, what did you think about the presentation? What are you excited about, man?
Yeah. So, when I initially saw the teaser of Avowed years back now, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Um, I thought, Skyrim, Obsidian's take of Skyrim. It's gonna be magical, high elven or whatever. It's gonna be swords and guns and magic, and it's gonna be so cool. It's gonna be so open world, and of course, after thinking about it a little bit, of course, with Outer Worlds, I just played it. I'm just like, yeah. maybe it's not going to be as wide and vast as Skyrim that I'm thinking of. It's going to be more smaller scaled. And then we saw this kind of presentation. It's kind of the first really presentation of showing like actual gameplay or
Yeah.
what the game is. It's kind of crazy to hear, it's coming out this year. And this is kind of like the first time we're really seeing this game or showcasing this game. Of course, it's with the Pillars of Eternity lore. Is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is in this
Okay.
Pillars of Eternity universe.
Yes. So it's going to be associated a lot with that lore, which is super cool to hear. Um, they really wanted to focus on the combat of this of this presentation. That was the idea, and
Yeah.
that's fine. I was like, okay, I think I understand the kind of the point or the purpose of this presentation. I'm sure we're gonna have more information later about these systems. Okay, let's see how this kind of gameplay loop. How would that go? And I saw, double wielding. You got wands, you got guns, you got swords, you got shields. You go boo 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 boo. I felt like a Doom game.
Yeah. In a
In a
lot of
game.
ways, it's like really, it seems like it can be really fast paced if you want it to be. Like they
Yes.
really kept stressing in the presentation, like it's all about choice when it comes to your weapon loadouts, because you can have a bunch of different
Mhm.
weapon loadouts, and some of them are like really fast, and then some of them are like slower, like sword and board, tanky kind of
Mhm.
style as well. Like you've got
Mhm.
a bunch of different choices there, which is cool.
Yeah, I saw two things that was super neat. One was like with the vines, like holding down creatures and then like letting them attack you. I think that was one cool interactivity. And then another one where you can freeze an opponent and then like crush it with a sword, and it was like ice, particles breaking down. I think I like that kind of um synergy between like two different type of mechanics. So I'm curious to mix it up, and it seems like that a lot of that inspiration idea is coming from Skyrim, like because you
Yep.
did have that dual wield nature going on in that game. I always love doing a one sword and a healing on the left, so um, I'm sure they're kind of just reinventing the wheel, adding a little bit more features into it. So I'm pretty excited for that. I think with the choice based stuff, I was like, that seems pretty typical to me.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, sure. That's a quest that happens. I have to make a choice somehow.
Yeah.
So
That seems
yeah.
like every Obsidian game, as we talked about with kind of their history and what type
Hmm.
of games they make. Like they always make very choice heavy games, and all we saw from the story just seemed like that. Which is why, like, when we did Xbox Drive this past week with myself, Donnie, and Sean, one of the things that Donnie and Sean actually brought up was like, first of all, they were both more impressed with this and are more on board with this game now.
Hmm.
But they just want to know more about the story and more about what you're doing and what this world's all about.
Hmm.
Which of course they didn't really do here.
No, they
But
didn't.
also it's just like this game's coming out in fall, so I'm like pretty sure like at the summer showcase this year, what we're gonna get from this game is gonna be like the story trailer of
Yeah.
answering those questions, being like, here's what you're actually doing in this game. Here's what this game's actually about.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely would like to see that, but I also would like to see if there are any more systems kind of involved with this game other than the combat. And the magic. Like I want to see how that works. Like how do you learn magic?
Yep.
What are the skill trees are like? Is there crafting in here? There's a lot of unknowns still with this game. But yeah, I'm overall excited for it. It looks like definitely a step up in first person I don't know, like how
High
elven magic,
fantasy.
high fantasy. That's the word I was trying to go for. Yeah, high fantasy combat I've
Yeah.
ever seen. So
Yeah. No,
it's
this game
exciting.
this game looks rad. I think the combat looks great, and I'm definitely like pretty excited about it. I know, like, I would love to see, and I'm gonna steal this from Donnie a little bit from when we talked about it on Friday, but like I would kind of love to see like what you're like the minute to minute gameplay of you like maybe approaching a situation and then like how it seeing like a full battle maybe play out.
Hmm.
But I feel like that I overall I'm pretty impressed with what I saw from the combat. And of course, with Obsidian, I'm anticipating that the story is going to be at least good, if not great.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
anything beyond that, I'll be impressed. And I've got to say, I'm excited about this game. If this
Yeah.
game looks really cool, I think it's of all of Microsoft's first party games this year, it's probably the game I'm most excited about this year. Like Hellblade 2, I think is going to be really solid as well. But like, I don't know, there's something about this game that I'm just actually more excited about than that game.
Yeah.
And then
those are very different games, I think.
Yeah.
I still need to play the first Hellblade, so I'll definitely play it before the sequel. I hear it's very good.
But it's very short. Kevin Ainsworth just literally just played through it today. He's just like, all right, I'm starting my Hellblade 2. He's like, this morning. He's like, I'm starting my Hellblade 1 replay, and then 5 hours later, he's like, 5 hours, I'm done this game. So there you go.
Of course he did. Good for him.
No. It's actually like he brought up the point in the Discord where it's like it's quicker to go through that game if you know all the answers to the puzzles, which it's very puzzle heavy. But,
got it.
Yeah,
cool.
But I can't wait for Avowed. So fall 2024. Hopefully we'll learn more at the summer showcase. And Garrett, last question before we kind of move on to listener questions. What do you think about the key art with the Skelly boy? Like people were freaking out about this key art, Garrett.
No, I like it. It's pretty rad. It has this conflicting nature of like bright colors, but it's a skeleton. Like that. I think that's what's the biggest thing. It's so detailed in like the various things. It's like coming to life, but it's a skeleton. If you look at the full picture, looks super dope. Hopefully that's like a big boss or something, or in the game to see. So.
Well, we see lots of skeletons in the trailer. Like you're fighting skeleton mages, you're fighting normal skeletons. This game feels very skelly heavy.
I want a skeleton boss that's gonna be like the cover art though, with trees just branching out everywhere. And I'm curious. They were going pretty fast in that gameplay. I wanted to see a little bit more how the enemies reacted, because they didn't really give an idea of what they were doing too much. It was more about the attacks themselves, which is fine. I just want to see the other way around.
Yeah, we saw some clips of the enemies coming towards your character, like about to pounce on you, but then you reacted by attacking them, or blocking some attacks and things like that. But you're right, like I think we need to see a little bit more of that. But overall, it was a very impressive show.
We're excited.
Can't wait to watch it. We'll, of course, be talking about Avowed later this year, you and I, which will be exciting.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Anyways, Garrett, let's let some of our friends into the dungeon with us. We're going to start with Savoy Prime, who, of course, just knows the key to my heart, Garrett, because Savoy Prime asks, since Microsoft and Sega have a good working relationship, do you think Microsoft will get the Alpha Protocol IP from Sega and put Obsidian to work on the sequel? I'd like to see this happen because folks really slept on Alpha Protocol. You know what, Savoy Prime? They sure did, because Alpha Protocol is a cool game for folks that haven't heard me drone on about Alpha Protocol before, because it's been a while, Garrett. It's been a while since I've talked about Alpha Protocol. Of course, this is like a spy-based, role-playing game from Obsidian that was on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. There is currently no way to play this besides wheeling out your Xbox 360 or your PlayStation 3.
That's terrible.
But it's a cool game. It's a cool choice-based third-person role-playing game from Obsidian that feels like a BioWare game in so many ways. It just didn't get amazing reviews at the time, but trust me, the game is really good. It's really fun. And Savoy Prime and we're seeing eye to eye on this one, Garrett, because it's good.
So, and it came out like 2010. I don't know how these, how Obsidian did Fallout New Vegas and then this, like just like boom, boom, like that. So
that's just how it works, man. That was the one like non-licensed game they did in that window, or like sequel to a previous game that they got to do. That was their only new IP at that time, which was interesting. But I like that game a lot, Savoy Prime. Unfortunately, to answer your question, I don't think that's ever happening. I think they've just given up on Alpha Protocol.
Let it die. Let it die.
I mean, I at least would love to see, if nothing else, some kind of remastered version of Alpha Protocol just come back to make it modern playable, and then to make everyone realize they were wrong about Alpha Protocol. So then maybe we get a sequel one day. But I don't actually think that that's actually happening at this point. The most we can account for is the game eventually somehow comes back to backwards compat, or we get a remastered version one day.
Yeah, I wonder why it's not backwards compat. Like that's
because
one of
Sega
the games
owns the
that
IP.
So did all Sega owned IP games are not backwards compatible?
Oh no, I mean only some of them are. It's just that even though Microsoft owns Obsidian, the Sega still owns the IP, so they'd still have to license it from Sega.
Oh, okay. So it's more of a licensing deal with Sega than anything
Yeah.
else. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And they just don't care about this game as much as, the Sonic games or the other games that they have on back.
I can understand. Well, no, I can't understand that because we all know Sonic.
That's not true. Sonic Unleashed is a wonderful game, Garret, and you know it.
Just, I can't.
The werehog, okay? It's got a werehog in it. But
I had that game.
Yeah, it's certainly a game. Yeah, it's not good. Next up, we got Fulia, who says, "Hello, friends. Hope you're doing well. I would like some recommendations for some wholesome / cozy role-playing games. What games can you recommend for some of us cozy gamers that aren't too long, but still fun and wholesome?" Garret, I don't know about you, but I haven't played many cozy role-playing games. So
I haven't played too much either, but I think a recent one that come to mind is Sea of Stars. That is like, it is kind of hardcore, but at the same time, it has this, the pixel art has this cozy nature to it where it has very bright colors. You're going around, it looks beautiful. So I wouldn't say, oh, it's warm and fuzzy and cozy. I wouldn't say like that, but definitely the pixel art. And it's a pretty easy RPG, relatively speaking, because you're not really grinding too much. There's not like a boss that's like too hard or anything like that. You can scale the difficulty pretty well. I would give Sea of Stars definitely a shot as a cozy RPG. Another one, Ryan, Child of Light.
Oh, it's been so long since I've heard you talk about Child of Light, Garret. You used to talk about it a lot, and it's been a while since we.
It's been a while. For people who don't know, A Child of Light is a Ubisoft game. Came out 2014. And I wish they had a sequel to it, but never. I don't think they ever will.
The best part is, Garret, at the same time as that came out, because they were both like there was it released in tandem with Valiant Hearts, which was like that World War I game, and Valiant Hearts got a sequel, but not Child of Light. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it was just, the UB art way. Like, I don't know. They just kind of chose whatever they wanted to do. But Child of Light is a turn-based role-playing game about this princess and her life and becoming an adult. It's very emotional. I love the story. It's always in rhymes. It's like a children's storybook. And it's a very tight combat. It's very good. So definitely recommend Child of Light. It's always on sale on Switch, Steam, Xbox, PlayStation. So you can find it pretty much anywhere. I was trying to look up more cozy RPGs. People were saying Stardew Valley. And I'm like, that's not an RPG.
It kind of is. It kind of is.
Okay.
Yeah, Stardew Valley is actually, I mean, it says in the description it's a role-playing game. And from I remember playing, you have a bunch of stats, you go into caves and you fight monsters. Like, it's very much a role-playing game. But you're right. Like, it's not the first thing I would think of. It's more of a farming sim than the role-playing game. But, and Harvest Moon, I think, kind of fits that same bill too. Like Harvest Moon is kind of in the same camp, where I would qualify that more as a farming game than a role-playing game, even though it does have role-playing elements. Whereas for me, I thought about this a little bit. And first one I'm going to recommend, actually, because I know Fulia, you just started your Final Fantasy journey with Final Fantasy 16. But there's actually a cute, cozy Final Fantasy game, which is actually an old Final Fantasy game that got like a remake on the PlayStation 4. And that's Chocobo Mystery Dungeon. Chocobo Mystery Dungeon. You play as a Chocobo. He's very cute and adorable. And you go through the dungeon with all your Chocobo pals. And it's a very like cute and cuddly game. Yes, there are a lot of like turn-based role-playing elements, but it kind of fits in the same kind of cozy camp that you talk about with Sea of Stars. But I think it's actually a little less hardcore than that. I think it's a little more approachable than that game. So Chocobo Mystery Dungeons, I think, is a good look. Another one, if you like rhythm games and you like Final Fantasy, The At Rhythm is a very, cozy game. Of course, it's a rhythm game though, so it's probably not what you're looking for, Fulia. So which is why the other one I'll maybe throw out there if you want something that is a little more on the technical side, but is very cute, is Trials of Mana. I actually think it's a very
That's true.
cute game because you find it the monster designs in that game, Garret, are so cute. They're very adorable. Like you're fighting rabbites and like mushrooms that are all like just very colorful and like interesting looking enemies. Like they're very like cutesy kind of enemies. Like that the Mana series is kind of known for the cutesy enemy kind of thing. And the characters are cute too. Like the main your controlled characters and stuff like that. I feel like that might be another game that kind of fills that niche, but it is a little more hardcore because it is a remake of a Super Nintendo role-playing game. So it does have the elements of, you know, more like stats and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't really help you more. Just again, I don't think you and I play a lot of cozy.
I think another, I mean, 3DS has had full of like cutesy, cartoonish RPGs, and I think the one that really comes to mind is Fantasy Life.
Okay.
And the new one, the sequel, Fantasy Life I, is coming out later this year on Switch. So be on the lookout for that one. It looks very cute as well. It's basically, you know, you're kind of this avatar character that can go into different types of jobs. Very, I would say similar to Stardew Valley, but less farming sim and more job based. And it's very cute. It has that chocobo, not chocobo, but chibi type of style with it. So I think that one is cool. People were saying Dragon Quest series just
Oh
in
my God.
general. Those are hardcore, but they, you know, the aesthetics, yeah, sure, it's cozy, but it's, man, they're long RPGs. They're
not only long, but they're very technical. Like way more technical than anything like Trials of Mana is.
Right.
Also, at least with Trials of Mana, it's much shorter. So yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. All right. Next one, we got Drellesh, who says, "Greeting, gents. Really excited about the topic for tonight's show. I used to be a big fan of Black Isle Studios, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and the games that they produced, the original Fallout series, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment. It was my staple diet of gaming and the beginning of my love for computer role-playing games. Now all of this is long in the past, and I'm not sure about the legacy of Black Isle Studios lives on in Obsidian Entertainment. I'm also looking forward to Avowed as well. I'm not so sure what to think though, but it does invoke a lot of excitement. What are your thoughts about the game? Does it deserve a second look?" So yeah, we talked about Avowed a lot. I think we're both pretty excited about it. Does it, you know, bring on the legacy of Black Isle Studios? A little bit, but not really. No, I feel like they, in a lot of ways, left that history behind, except for, of course, the mainline Pillars of Eternity games. I feel like that's where they do that. Whereas Avowed, for the most part, is kind of like a spin-off for that series. If you look at it that way. So, I mean, I think their roots are kind of there still with Pillars of Eternity, but beyond that, I feel like they're very much focused on creating these first-person role-playing game experiences, and that's just their jam. Or just these other unique ideas with Pentiment or with Grounded. And I'm actually thinking we're going to see more of that as well. Like we haven't got anything announced yet like that, but like I imagine like next year we probably get another game that's like that, like a smaller game from Obsidian that's like totally different from everything else.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think also I feel like Avowed more and more is very similar to Outer Worlds in a sense of its game structure and in the sense of its first person like role-playing game mechanics. Like it's gonna be pretty close to that. It's just not going to be with, you know, guns and really companions. It doesn't seem like it's a major focus, more just high fantasy, choice based stuff.
Well, you got guns in this one though. You can
you do have guns. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I think it's more rooted from, let's say, their first person RPGs like Fallout New Vegas. Like I guess KOTOR 2 was third person.
Yeah, it was.
But it's like similar in nature. These type of games. So
yeah, because even down to the point where KOTOR is also like an open zone kind of role-playing game where you're exploring these planets, but they're like these smaller zones, which is actually an interesting comparison. But,
yeah.
All right. Last two questions of the night come to us from Jarden, aka Yarden, who asks. Now, their first question is: the next Witcher game is entering full production this year, apparently. How hyped are you for it? And when do you think we're gonna get the next Witcher game? I hate to burst your bubble on this, Yarden, but I would be very surprised if we saw the next Witcher game before 2026 at this point.
Yeah, no. I definitely, yeah. I would think they would tease it next year.
Maybe
If
a teaser,
anything.
but it ain't releasing before 2026. No
Oh,
way
I
in
was
hell.
thinking 2028. I was thinking
Yeah.
like, PS6, Xbox Series 2, energy for sure. If they're
Yeah.
starting development now. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
especially
but
because they
I,
just wrapped up Phantom Liberty and the team's
mhm,
now fully moving over to this next Witcher game. Like, I feel like that's like years and years away. Kind of like what happened with Cyberpunk, because Cyberpunk
mhm.
was announced like 6 or 7 years before it came out. Like, I'm feeling similar vibes with this one. And like I said, 2026 is probably the earliest we can expect it. But to your point, Garrett, I think it is probably much later. I think it is probably a next gen game.
Witcher 3 is still a fantastic RPG. Everyone should go try it. Even from just a technical standpoint, I'm still so amazed. Like, it's still great. Like, this is an 8-year-old game.
Yep.
This came from 2015, and it just still looks gorgeous on the PC. Like, it's kind of crazy. I would, if anyone's interested, definitely try out The Witcher 3. It's such a great RPG, and so I'm curious what they're gonna do with the next Witcher. I hope it's not Geralt. I feel like his chapter, it didn't end, but you more or less are like kind of at the end of his his ropes here. He's getting old, in Witcher 3. So I hope they do another character. That would be cool. Whether it be I forget all these character names, but like kind of his, daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I just hope it's a different character, and hopefully, it's gonna be the more Witcher kind of signature I've seen before. I absolutely love Witcher 3, so I'll definitely replay it
Yeah,
sometime.
I
Mhm,
think I'm with you on the fact that it won't be Geralt as well.
mhm.
It'll probably, maybe it's Ciri, maybe it's someone
Maybe
else,
it's Siri. That's it. Yes, yeah.
or maybe
So
it's a different Witcher. I don't know. But Garrett, I was reminded of something because I forgot that this was
sure.
a thing. Do you remember that they announced in 2022 that
Mm.
a full remake of the original Witcher is also coming?
I think I heard rumblings of it.
Because
I
it was
admit.
formally announced on October 26th, 2022. But CD Projekt Red's not the developer. It's actually a different company that's developing it.
Oh, okay.
They're working in conjunction with CD Projekt Red. Like they're like CD Projekt Red has the full creative supervision over the
Mhm.
game, but it's being developed by Fool's Theory. They were the
Mm.
developers of the Thaumaturge, which is coming out later this year.
Oh, I'm interested in that game. It
Yeah,
looks pretty good. So, keep on the lookout for that game, and keep on the lookout for Witcher 1 remake, because that game definitely needs a remake.
because Witcher One remake. I forgot that was coming. That
Mhm.
one's definitely coming out before whatever's new is from CG Project Red
Oh,
Witcher
yeah.
games. So like, because they're also doing that in Unreal Engine 5 fully. So like, I expect
So
that.
cool.
I don't think that game's coming this year, but I think next year we maybe see Witcher remake. So
Cool.
I think that's the next Witcher game to be excited about, is Witcher remake of the first
Yes,
one.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
But to Jarden's second question, Garrett. Also, thoughts on the Infinite Wealth New Game Plus controversy,
Mm.
dirty or just the next step in monetizing game content? So, Garrett, are you up to date on what we're even referring to with this?
Yeah, and instead of being free, it's a $15 DLC, this new game plus,
Yeah,
with Infinite Wealth.
yeah,
Eh, I don't know, man. Like, I see so many cosmetics and mechanics being paywall. You kind of see this with Atlas in general. I'm wondering because of, I mean, either it's going to be coming from Atlas or coming from Sega. Is a huge Sega initiative. Can I just piecemeal this? It's kind of weird seeing new game behind a
yeah.
paywall.
Well, I mean,
Kind of
it's been
sucks.
a staple feature for a long
Yeah,
time of just
that's
not
true.
being
Yeah, that too.
in a
Yeah.
game. But I'm also looking it up, Garrett, because I tried Googling this because I remember that other games have done this before. Like, I think Control, as an example, was a game that had New Game Plus behind a paywall at one point, and then it's not at this point.
Hmm.
And there's a couple other games that have had that as well. So I mean, this isn't the first game to do this, of
Yeah.
having New Game Plus behind a paywall. It just happens to be the newest game that happens to be under scrutiny. personally, it doesn't bother me as much as someone who doesn't do New Game Plus, but maybe I'm not the right person to ask about it, because I feel like people who are really into playing their games over again and like getting all the stuff they're probably, you know, more wanting a feature like this to be in the game. Especially like if you're a speedrunner, as an example, like speedrunners who speedrun games rely on New Game Plus, especially for role-playing games. So I imagine that might be a little bit of a thing that, you know, makes them a little bit mad. For me, I don't see it as an issue, because it's just, you know, we've gotten, you know, add-ons like this, microtransactions like this before, and it, you know, I'm just used to this by now. Plus, like I said, I'm just not really super into New Game Plus, so it's not really a big deal for me, but I can understand that point of view if you are upset about it.
Yeah, I'm not interested in New Game Plus like much at all with these type of games, but man, I think they're putting this behind a paywall. You're punishing the players that really love your game. That's what you're kind of doing. They're already gonna get kind of the super deluxe edition or
but that
whatever.
comes with the New Game Plus anyways.
Yeah. I'm just saying, you know, like the fact that you're kind of just putting it behind a paywall
right
in the beginning, right in front, it just seems like you're upsetting your hardcore fan base more than actually making a profit. But you know, I don't know the sale figure, so I'm just speculating at this point. It sucks. It happens. It's business too. It's not like, you know, they're not allowed to do this. Like, it's totally evil. It's just like how it is. That's just how the business goes. So yeah.
Exactly. You and I are just too desensitized to this, Garrett. We're just too used to people putting stuff behind paywalls at this point.
Yes, definitely.
So, but again, we're also not the audience for this either. Because like the only time I really play New Game Plus for anything is like if I really want the platinum trophy for a game, I will go and do New Game Plus or something. But like if it requires it, but like I'm not someone that really enjoys New Game Plus a lot. Unless the only game that I've really felt like I enjoy New Game Plus for is a game like Mass Effect, because it's very choice based, and you know I go back and do different things with my Shepherd when I do New Game Plus. So like that's the only time where I've always like that I've really interacted with New Game Plus.
Yeah. I only did New Game Plus with like Borderlands, and then like man, what was the other one? Yeah, these type of games, like Baldur's Gate 3, I could totally imagine replaying, because it's gonna be a totally different game if you do just different choices in it. So yeah, I like those type of New Game Pluses, but man, like going through a New Game Plus, let's say a Persona, you know, it's just like, oh, you're just going through the literal same thing again.
Yeah.
So
like definitely when because the Persona 3 Reload trophy guide came out this week, Garrett, and luckily I'm like, oh, looking at this guide, I can do everything in one playthrough. So no New Game Plus needed. So you can do everything in one playthrough. So you better believe I'm getting a guide out when it comes out, and I'm just gonna play along with the guide, so I can just get the platinum trophy in one go.
Are you gonna play on PlayStation?
I'm probably gonna play on Xbox because it's on Game Pass.
Okay, cool. So
I mean,
100% Achievo.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm too used to seeing platinums, but you know what I mean.
Okay. I was curious if you're gonna play on PlayStation. That would have been interesting.
The thought occurred to me, but it's also one of those things where it's like, well, it's on Game Pass. How can I argue with that?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, how can I argue with free? And when I say free, I mean I'm already paying for Game Pass. So why wouldn't I take advantage of it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, Garrett, I think that's gonna do it for tonight's show. So before we go, Garrett plugs you out.
You can follow me at Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, at Bland Explosion. You can also find me on the Discord, very active on the RPG Cave and Xbox Drive. As you can tell, I can talk all things Steam Deck and PC handheld or whatever. So just shout out to me. Well, we'll get you streaming on your Steam Deck as well. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. There you go.
Nice. I mean, I don't have a Steam Deck, so you can't force me to stream from my Steam Deck.
Darn it.
I know. I mean, I could stream from my Microsoft Surface that's sitting right next to me, but I don't want to do that. That's not the same. That's not the Steam is streaming from a Steam Deck. But actually, the last time I tried to streaming from the Microsoft Surface, things did not go well. So
oh no,
probably not a wise thing. But as for me, you can find me on the old Twitter at Ryan Turford. And you can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming. Right here, youtube.com/Carpool Gaming. And of course, podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 121st level of the RPG Cave. Yes, folks, that's Palindrome. And we're out.
Bye-bye.